Secretary of State Rex Tillerson's visit to Russia this week is likely to be a tense one. On Friday, Donald Trump directed dozens of Tomahawk missiles at the Syrian airbase. Former officials say Bashar al-Assad launched a chemical attack against his own people. A group of Syrian allies, including Russia and Iran, have since released a statement saying, quote, "What America waged in an aggression on Syria is a crossing of red lines. From now on, we will respond with force to any aggressor or any breach of red lines from whomever it is, and America knows our ability to respond well." A statement that did not deter the White House, according to today's press briefing.
The sight of people being gassed and blown away by barrel bombs ensures that if we see this kind of action again, we hold open the possibility of future action. I can't imagine a stable and peaceful Syria where Bashar al-Assad is in power.
A recent CBS poll finds 57% of Americans approve of last week's strike, an action Barack Obama never took, but one that Hillary Clinton urged in a recent interview.
I really believe that we should have and still should take out his airfields and prevent him from being able to use them to bomb innocent people and drop sarin gas on them.
Joining me is the guy who conducted that interview, New York Times columnist Kristof and former New York Times reporter Sheryl WuDunn. They've co-authored several books, including their latest, A Path Appears, Transforming Lives, Creating Opportunities. They also happen to be a Pulitzer Prize-winning husband and wife. I won Most Improved Camper 2 years in a row, so don't Bigfoot me, you two. It's a pleasure to have you both here.
Good to be with you.
You wrote that you thought the president made the right move. 3 out of 5 Americans roughly agree with you. Do you worry that a president who thrives on those kinds of numbers might do more of the same to get more of those numbers?
Look, I worry about just about everything involving President Trump, and I do think he made the right call in Syria, but I worry that there may also be some kind of military action vis-a-vis the port of Hodeidah in Yemen, and worst of all, North Korea. That would be the most dangerous thing.
Less based upon merit, I guess, is what I'm saying, and more based upon obsession with American people liking what you do.
I don't think in my journalistic career I've ever met a politician who is as less familiar with policy issues as President Trump. So, yeah, I don't think it would be based on deep policy, but more, I mean, in this case, it was incredibly impulsive. One moment, it was our policy not to do anything with Syria. The next moment, it was our policy to fire missiles.
One paper in Britain said Ivanka's the one who convinced him, actually, to do this when she saw the video. You know, a U.S. official said today, Sheryl, that Russia knew was the verb they use of what was going on. John McCain said in the last 24 hours, not only did they know, but they cooperated. What does this do to the, I guess you call, sort of bromance between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin?
Well, I think that it's clear that Trump is being outnumbered. And so the question is, how will he flip-flop without losing his base? I mean, he's...
On Russia, you mean?
Yeah, on Russia. He's really a master of flip-flopping. And so, you know, he probably can flip-flop and not really have much damage done to him.
You know, speaking of flip-flopping, there's flip-flopping going on in real time. I mean, we've all seen 3,000 times in the last day or so Rex Tillerson saying, well, let the Syrian people decide Assad's fate, and Nikki Haley, the U.S. ambassador to UN, saying we need regime change. Is this because their secret plan is that they don't have a plan, or is it just governed by chaos? What is it?
Typically, you have administration forming policy at the top. And in this case, I don't think President Trump has a clearer policy on Syria or on most other topics. And so I think Nikki Haley is being spontaneous at the UN, and I think Tillerson is largely trying to keep his head down, but to some degree is doing something similar at state. And so you have a Pentagon policy, you have a State Department policy, you have a mission to the UN policy.
You ever seen that kind of thing before, speaking of history?
You know, everything about this administration is kind of unprecedented.
Well, beyond that, we were just up at Harvard talking with a lot of people there, and what's surprising is that the State Department has no one there besides Rex Tillerson. And
he locks himself in his office most days, the Washington Post said the other day.
But there's just no depth. In other words, they just don't have the staff to even develop policy.
You know, I like food-related stories, and I don't know why. I mean, I've read several times the fact that when the president of China was eating dinner at Mar-a-Lago, it was after the Dover sole and the strip steak or whatever it was, that Donald Trump said to Xi that this thing is going on here.
I was wondering how you were going to segue from
food
Syria
to
okay.
Well, there it is. But Rex Tillerson said that at that dinner, the president of China said something like, well, it's understandable he took this military action. I'm paraphrasing, in light of the fact that children were involved. They go back and the state news agency said it's the act of a weakened politician, Donald Trump. What does this little interlude mean in terms of our ability to convince the Chinese government that they need to help us with North Korea? Is this going to be a hurdle along the way or no?
Well, they have been asking, and the U.S. has been asking China, this has been a negotiation going on for years, and so it really has to depend upon what the Chinese are going to be willing to do. And
what leverage we have, right?
What leverage we have, and certainly, there's been talk about Trump trying to, engage in a trade with the Chinese. We'll be softer on trade with you if you help us on North Korea. Now, the Chinese aren't necessarily going to look at it that way because they really fear a collapse of North Korea, and so they are going to act in their self-interest. So it's going to really depend upon what they see is going to help them, not what is necessarily going to help the U.S. But obviously, they are very aware of any backlash.
Donald Trump's. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that, the basic problem in North Korea is that North Korea poses a huge threat to this country in the coming years, but we don't really have a plan that can address that threat. And neither Democrats do nor Republicans. China, at least, does have a strategy, a plan. North Korea, I think, everybody agrees simply is not going to give up its nuclear weapons, its nuclear program. There maybe a freeze can be achieved, but they're not just going to give away their nukes at this point.
Bet Hillary Clinton may have a plan. In addition to her saying that, I think it was hours before he ordered the action. Is that not correct?
That's right.
That she would bomb the airfields. She also, here's something else she had to say about November 8th. Here's Hillary Clinton.
There are things we certainly could have done better. There are things I certainly could have done better. But I think it is fair to say that the outside intervention, the combination of the Comey letter on October 28th, WikiLeaks, which played a much bigger role than I think many people understand yet. Certainly misogyny played a role. That just has to be admitted.
Well, she came out of the woods full throttle with you, finally. It's the first. Is this helpful? Is this, not only helpful to go back and talk about why she lost, most of which, at least from having read about the interview, doesn't include, I made a lot of mistakes, I know, even though she said I could have done this, but also this, here's what I would do in terms of Syria. Is this helpful to the balance of power and democracy to have her back center stage?
Look, she was pretty open, I think, partly because she does not intend to run for office ever again. She would not have referred to misogyny if she was ever going to be running for office again.
But doesn't she drown out other Democratic voices when she decides to talk to you and everybody knows how big a deal it's going to be?
I think that we'll have to see. If she were to remain on the podium, then that might be the case. But I do think that there is a point to looking for lessons learned from the 2016 election. Certainly, the issue of Russian interference is something that we just have to excavate. And I do think that the issue of gender in America is going to be an ongoing issue. In the case of Syria, her comments on Syria, she gave President Trump useful cover because one of his problems is that he has said so many false things so often that he doesn't have a lot of credibility. And it's been very useful to him to have liberals and Democrats come forward and say, yes, in this case, that was the right call.
Speaking of gender issues, I know that you've said the moral challenge of this century is the gender inequity. And I think for the most part, you're not talking about people at the top. But why have we not been able to join so many Western nations that have elected women leaders? And obviously, we have a pretty uniform record in not doing it. What's that about?
That is a great question. I do think that the country isn't ready for a lot of leadership changes, and that's partly because we do have an issue with education. There's, an imbalance in education. There's greater inequality. There's a lot of people struggling with just making ends meet, that they just don't have time or room in their mind to think about, more competition from women. So I do think that we have a lot of issues at home that are detracting from the ability for men and women to be on equal footing. So I think that while we still have to hold the banner and fight for these issues, it still will take a while.
We only have 30 seconds left. Your thing about Trump haters just put me totally over the edge. You're originally writing about you got to listen. Is there a cure for this? I mean, you guys wrote in a book that, giving to others makes you feel better. Can you convince somebody that listening to others will make them feel and do better too, or is that a hopeless effort?
I think we have to as a country, and I spend so much of my time trying to build empathy in conservatives and try to avoid them otherizing people. And so in this case, it's bizarre when you have liberals otherizing Trump voters and feeling no empathy for Trump voters in turn.
Is the verb used, otherizing?
Otherizing.
Is that your verb?
Yeah, well, I think it's my verb.
I love that verb. That is perfect. Nick, Kristof, it's great to see you.
Good to be with
Sheryl,
you.
Thank you so much. Really
Thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much.
Thank you
Yes.
both. Really appreciate it.